Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it. This is an apt workshop. We'll get started in a couple of minutes here. I just want to give some people some time to filter in. This is an apt workshop because many of you will probably have or are considering switching over to the new product, ACDC Photo Studio 2026. Yeah, we're going to be doing that, Sharon. Absolutely. Um, that is through a process called database conversion, which we'll talk about today. Hi, Rick. Hi, John. All right. Hi, Uwe. Or you, I suppose. Sorry. All right. Cool. Hi, Helen. Hope everyone is doing really well. It's in the Pacific Northwest today. It is a very dreary, very rainy day. Very what would be the word for it? It would be appropriate, I think would be the word. It's it's as soon as October hits, it gets really rainy. So especially the Vancouver, Greater Vancouver area. So Peter asked, I have to dash an appointment in 10 minutes. Sorry, hope to get to deal with my question from the forum. Oh, I will have a peek at the uh my the chat history and see if I can answer that. So but yeah, we'll have a look at that as well. Thanks, Peter. Sorry that you have to go, but I totally understand. For many people, this is not a great time, just because there's people all over the world that maybe aren't in North America, where this is a given 3 to 4 hour difference for them. And we have some Australian users that are like, this is actually at 2 o'clock in the morning for me, so I can't attend. Okay, I hope they're well, Peter, and that there's no bad news. It's all good news. So, or just a routine checkup, rather. Um, okay, I'm gonna turn on my chat here, as well as the Q&A. So, as all with all of our workshops, we're just gonna do a little Q&A. If you have any questions, rather just fire them in the Q&A panel, and I'll get to them when I can. I'm gonna make this quite a bit smaller here, and we're going to share my screen. Let's see here. Share, share screen. Not this one, but that one. Okay. So yeah, let's get going here. Might as well. So you if you have switched over to ACDC 2026, the word database has probably been staring you at the face in our new home screen. If not, the database is something that you've interacted with probably or looked at through maybe a combination of exiting the program, where routinely what happens is there'll be the notice to make sure that the metadata that you've added to your images is embedded, or in order that the metadata or whatever that you've added has been sort of is going to be embedded within the files, and therefore is considered secure in the file. In this case, basically, there's a variety of different interactions where you would have maybe seen the word database, and one of the ones that's very obvious as well. I just need to close this. Is that you might have seen it on opening the software, and oftentimes what will be stated is that you're starting a new database, or a database is going to be created for you, and from there all of this contents that ACDC deals with, whether it be thumbnails, so the actual storage and holding of a thumbnail, to any information that you've added to your files, in this case metadata, that's going to be stored in this database. And so a database basically is this place where ACDC stores all of the things that it changes to files. Okay, so let's maybe think about this in a little different way, first of all. So when we start up ACDC for the first time, when you've never used ACDC for the first time, you will have it will have created a database for you. And so again, this database is a storage place for all of these things that we do in ACDC. And in fact, we can't actually engage with ACDC without one. So one is created by default for you. I'll show you where that ends up. So in ACDC here, And again, I'm using ACDSee 2026, so there has been a new database that's been created for me in the software. But if I go to database and say open, I'm going to be given this location on my hard drive where my database is placed. So in this case, you can see that actually the default .dbin, this is my database file, and it's located in a series here that might not be the easiest to remember, but it's an admin app data local ACD systems catalogs, and then 190, meaning the 2026 version of the product. Excuse me. So this has been created, and the way I know that it's been created for me is because it's called default. I didn't actually name that. So when I start interacting with ACDSee for the first time, I'm going to be saving to this particular database. Now, if I wanted to create my own database with a unique name and to start the process of adding my contents to it, I would interact from that space from the same place. I would go to File, Database, and New, and I would create a new database. And as you can see here, the location on my hard drive is accessible via this little section right here. And then I'd be able to add a new name and create a database to my liking in this case. And just to be very clear, this is highly unnecessary. You don't need to do this, but I just want to show you so you have a thorough understanding of what we're dealing with here. So what I can do if I wanted to, I can actually use this hierarchy. I can copy this and paste this to any of my folders in Windows, and I can actually navigate to exactly this location. So in this case, default dbin is right there. And if I actually go back to, let's say, go back to catalogs, you can see that there are older databases that are on this hard drive that are visible to me. So for example, 180 Ultimate also had a default database present. 170 Ultimate, so I think 2025's product had that, or 2024's product, etc. And you can see that I can go down and they're designated by Alt, Pro, and Home. So it's pretty clear to understand which database I'm pulling from. For me, I predominantly use Ultimate for all of my tutorials, but I do have to do tutorials for Home and Pro, and so I have these other folders here that go back all the way to, it looks like 2022 or 2023. So my point is that I have all these little databases, and the one that is the most newest in this case that's created upon using ACDSee Ultimate 2026 for the first time is this one. This also gives me an idea of where I can pull from when I go to convert my database. And what I mean by that is if I have a database, for example, I've used ACDSee 2025 or 2024 for a really long time, and I have like a really, really well-developed series of keywords and categories, and I have ratings and labels, blah, 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 that I like. I can actually use the conversion wizard to take that database in ACDSee 2026, which is Murray's question, and it looks like it's also Sharon's question, so we're getting to that. But there's a way for us to take that old database and make it our new database. So we'll get to that point. So I just want to highlight, first of all, though, that we can create a database, we can visualize like which database we're actually engaging with, and we can also change our database. So it looks like by hovering over the recent here, it looks like I can hover over a certain database, or I can use recent to move to a different database. General users probably wouldn't interact with changing the database that frequently. I think once you've kind of set your database, it's good. But there might be a world where certain individuals who work with really, really big collections of files, they might have a database for their work images. For example, their photography that they do with maybe they're a wedding photographer or a commercial photographer, and they have a database that's specific for their commercial photography. And then they have a secondary database that's specific for their personal projects, their travel photos, their photos of their wives and children, blah, blah, blah. So that might be a completely different database than their work database. So it's good to note that you can swap between these two things depending on your use case scenario. Okay, so before we go any further, what is a database and what does it contain? So I've opened up the help wizard here, but you can get to this by going to help contents. And if I just actually search, ooh, that's kind of odd. There we go. If I search for the word database, there's going to be a listing that pops up that tells us actually about what the database is. And this is also going to tell us what's actually stored within it. So hopefully everyone can see this screen. If you're ever curious about any function in ACDSee, just opening up the help database and then searching for the term that you want is actually a really good way to learn more about these tools. It's probably best used for things like tools and parts of the software that have clear names that you can search for really easily. Trying to search for like a specific terminology on how to do a certain operation might be a little bit different because that might not be like a um, industry standard terminology, in which case this help wizard might be a little bit looser. So actually searching for parts of the user interface is a really good way to find out more about what it does. So what does this actually say about the database? So it says the ACDSee Ultimate Database stores images, document, and media file information automatically when you browse your folders. So browse is a keyword here. So what browse means is when you're in ACDSee, browsing is an active term for opening up a folder and looking at the contents of it. So when it says browse, it means I have navigated somewhere either using the catalog panel or by using the folder panel, and this gives me the ability to engage with the contents of that. And then so this process of browsing, adding information, images, documents, etc., is called cataloging. And so the database increases the speed which you can browse, blah blah blah. But the main thing that we want to talk about here is what is actually contained within the database. And earlier I gave a hint that it would contain things like categories and keywords, but it's actually a bit more expansive than that. First and foremost is the one that I mentioned. So you can store cached thumbnail previews. So when I'm engaging in ACDSee, a cached thumbnail preview are these. So I have here all these images of these various folders with their contents. And when I navigate to such folder, this is not the image per se, this is a cached thumbnail. So when I browse to a new folder for the first time, something you might notice is that it'll actually populate this list of thumbnails. So I don't even know if I have a folder that has images I've never searched for. But if I open up an image folder, you can see that there's a second where the images are populated, and that's because these thumbnails are actually stored within the database. Basically, they're a brief of our image that is truncated in such a way that gives us the ability to quickly see the image. It's a really, really small version of our file, in essence. So that's stored in the database. So when you install ACDSee for the first time, say 2026, one thing you're going to notice is that when you browse, aka look to a folder or that sort of thing, you're going to see that ACDSee is going to take a moment to actually populate those images. Okay, so what else is stored within the database? Also within the database are categories, like I mentioned, and just for the uninitiated, categories is a form of property information that is added to ACDSee through ACDSee metadata. So what I've done is I've clicked on an image and I've opened up the properties panel, and there's a section within the properties panel on the right here that allows me to add categories to my files. So this gives me the ability to add these cuisine categories, for example, or I could go to wildlife, for example, or I could make my own categories. It's kind of beyond the scope of this workshop, but the point is that I can add a category to this file. If I was to add a category of 2022 to this file, as you can see, a couple icons appear. One is the indicator that there is a category in this image, and the other is just a embed pending metadata icon, which we'll get to closer to the end of this workshop. Point is, when I add metadata, when I add information like categories, keywords, color labels, authors, dates, ratings, captions, and face data, that information is then added to our database in our file, in ACDSee. So that counts for categories. Notes, I believe, are a simple one-line ACDSee metadata item. So a note can be added in properties under ACDSee metadata to the section notes. So if I was to add a note like "Hi World," very old internet speak, that would be added to my file, and that is then something that's added to the database. Things like keywords, so much like categories add a top level sort of broad category to our image, keywords add more specific content. So if there was an eagle in this image, now it has the keyword of eagle associated with it. So that is then added to the database. Coming back to our listing here, authors. Authors is another line from ACDSee metadata. So in this case, I'm not actually the author of this image, but let's say I'm the author of the edits. I am then the author there, and that is added to the database. What else do we have here? Dates, that's not going to be something that I'm going to be able to interact with as much, but I can set a date on my image. I don't believe so, Reverett. Let's just check. We can add pretty long notes. Let's just put it that way. Um, Dates we looked at, but dates are something that's typically associated with the upload or photograph image taken date. So this is might be metadata that's associated with the actual camera file, or it's associated with the day that it's been. If there is no camera file information, in the case of an image that's had its own metadata wiped, it'll just look at when you've added it to the database. So that date will be added. And then we have things like ratings, and ratings are located up here. So I can either add a rating by clicking on this little icon here or by clicking on this icon. And this is similar to the star system and other products, but basically, a rating of 5 might mean really good or really bad, depending on whatever your rating system is. But that's added up at the top here in this section or up at this section right here. And so that adds a metadata quality, an ACDSee metadata quality that rates this image. And then we have captions and face data. I also missed color labels, but color labels are this next to the rating. You can add a particular color label that adds this information underneath the file, as you can see here. And that just indicates, it flags it for a color. You might ask, how do I use this, or why would I use this? All of these sort of metadata qualities are kind of up to the user. I would say typically color labels would be some degree of, if you're working with your images and you have a plan for certain edits, maybe green would indicate that further edits are needed, blue would indicate that your image is complete, and red would indicate that you have not made any edits to your image whatsoever. So then there's captions and face data. So captions represents this guy right here. It's a broad level title in your ACDSee metadata. So caption might be a new image. Captions have other features. If you are creating a slideshow file, captions can be referenced to provide a little description at the bottom of your image when it presents itself in a slideshow. So there's certain aspects to captions that are unique, but basically it's a title. And then the final one was face data. And face data is not something I can add from this window per se, but when I go to add a name to somebody in people mode or in view mode, that is then added to face data. And that's then something that's considered for the ultimate database. So we have all these elements that that are added to the database. I just wanted to really highlight what particular things are added to the database, because if I just talk about the database in this way, the stakes aren't really clear to people, like what's being considered for basically being added to that. Okay, so earlier, Bill asked a question, and his question is, ACDSee does not automatically update database when you install a new version. It doesn't. What I mean by that is we kind of have to assume that our user A has never used ACDSee before, because there are many users that haven't. And then we also want to assume that making a new database or converting from an old database is a choice that you're doing. It's not something that this software does automatically. It's kind of, we wanted to act at a point of interaction there and not just make that choice on behalf of the users, because there might be situations where people actually do want to go through the process of constructing a database from scratch. So rather, what we do is we have a system for converting the database, which we're getting to. So Okay, so we answered Revert's question. We're going to answer Murray's in a moment. And then Charles said, when updating from 2025 version to 2026, does the new version use the last database? Okay, so we're going to answer that question as well. So, what have we covered so far? We've covered basically the fact that we can create a database. We know where the database is. We roughly know what the database does and what's contained within it. Now let's talk about maybe converting a database from an older version of the software. So, okay. So when we're in ACDC, if I navigate to, let's see here, I think it's in tools. Yeah. So if I navigate to tools, there's actually a couple sections in the top menu bar where database is something I can interact with. As I mentioned previously, database is in the file. And in the actual tools section, near the bottom, pardon me, there's metadata, which we'll get to, which actually interacts with the database. And then there's a section right here, literally called database, that gives us a couple options. And the two that I think are worth describing in this workshop is catalog files, which we'll touch base with a little bit later, and then the term convert database. There's also these things called optimized database and database maintenance. These go through the process of like culling and reducing the size of the database in ACDC. I'm not going to be touching on these in this workshop, but I just want to highlight that there are wizards that actually go through the process of doing database maintenance with you. But convert database, if I click on this, oops, this opens up in a different screen. It opens up this little wizard here. And what this says is this wizard will allow you to convert a database created by an earlier version of ACDC to the new format. The convert database will be imported into your current database. So this, what it's worthy of noting is that this doesn't just take that old database, it takes the contents of that database and then draws within them for the new software. So it pulls that information and puts them into your new database. So one of the benefits of this is I would recommend using the database conversion software when we're interacting with the database. And the reason why is because this always makes sure that the contents of whatever was previously you were previously using is translated to the new product. Therefore, there is no issues with any like any form of translation issues when new things are added to the software. It takes those old elements, and the developers have really intentionally gone in and said, okay, these are the certain fields that we want to interpret for the new software. This really only matters in situations where new database items are added, which have happened in the history of ACDC. But I just want to highlight that the conversion wizard and actually going through the conversion database process is probably the best way to take your old files and then consider them. I believe, I could be wrong about this, but my understanding is that ACDC can point to one last version of its database. So I could be wrong about this, but I believe there's a system in place where ACDC 2026 can reference a database from 2025, but we do not recommend that. We'd rather you go through the conversion process because it's more flawless in this case. Okay, so I'll click next to move forward. I'm pulling from ACDC 2025, so we already know that. And then I'm drawing from, this is from 180. So that's just, I can choose, it automatically selects 2025 by default, but I can actually go and select the exact database that's I'm being interacted with. Sharon asked if you convert a database, will the old one remain somewhere? Yes. Again, Sharon, I'm just pulling the information from this database. I'm not actually removing the old database. So this database will not be removed. It will not be, deleted in any way. It's just we're taking the contents from it. So I'm going to click next, and let's see here what it gives me options wise. Optimized database sounds good. It says rebuild thumbnails, EXIF, and IPTC data for local images. Depending on the size of the database, this may take some time. I'm not going to select this. I'm going to leave it unselected. First of all, I've already browsed all my files, so I already have thumbnails. And then EXIF and IPTC data, I don't actually care about that much because many of my images are stock photos, which don't contain this information already. And the images that do contain this information, I can add it or it already will be listed. So we're not super worried about that. We're really just worried about the ACDC metadata. I want to get back my keywords, etc. Um, so I'm going to click next, and then I'm going to click next as well. And well, yeah, click OK. And it's going to go through this process. It'll take a moment to complete this. Tom stated that Rodrigo created a tutorial last year on how to convert a database from 2024 to 2025. It is on the YouTube. It's under YouTube under ACDC. Yeah, we have lots of content directing people towards the conversion database wizard. I know Murray, you're sort of bothered by this, but we do have lots of content that discusses this at length. I figured because ACDC 2025 has sort of we've moved past it and we've moved into 2026. It's worth just reminding people that this is a process that you can do. Click finish, and it's now going to restart in order to reconstruct that database. So I believe Murray, that's answers your question. Hopefully Sharon, that's answered your question as well. I believe that let's see here, Bill Rose asked this question as well, and Charles. So just so you understand, that would be the process that you'd go through in order to basically convert your old database to the new software. Irina said, but after conversion, can you still run the old 2025? Yeah. So the 2025 you can still utilize, and it will still reference its old database or its original database. We are not destroying the old database. We're not stealing the database. We're just taking the contents of the database and considering it for our new database that we have. So in every database, think of it like this. It's the equivalent of two notepad documents. You have your original notepad document, you go control A and copy all the contents, and you go control control C and then control V in our new database, and that's what it's doing here. It's copying the contents of the database. So here we are, and if I go to pictures here, and if I go to any particular folder, if we go to categories, say, it looks like this wildlife photo has a category associated with it, and it has an animal association. All of these didn't exist in my 2026 database previously. These images now have, in this case, a bird and more specifically an eagle. So this was taken from my 2025 database and is now added to my 2026 software. No, Sharon, you can't. So Sharon's question is, when you convert an old database, can you leave out face data? Unfortunately, not. There's no way to selectively choose which parts you add and you don't from an old database. If I go to the convert database function here, oops, there's no section here that allows me to select which components are added. That being said, though, I would say that in general, it's probably better to convert your database and then just wipe all your people using people mode, like wipe all the face data associated with them, and then restart the process of essentially drawing on or detecting faces. I think it would be better in that case than maybe just trying to pull parts of a database or using the conversion wizard, which we'll talk about now, to the catalog files thing to catalog certain people but not others. Pardon me, sorry, I'm still a bit sick. Okay, so just to reiterate, we've talked about the database, just broadly what it is. We've talked about changing your database. We've talked about creating new databases, and we've talked also about organizing where that database is. We've also talked about what's contained within the database. So thumbnails, categories, keywords, color labels, authors, notes, that sort of thing. We understand what goes into the database when we make edits. One of the things that's worth noting too is in ACDSee, we have proprietary metadata. And what I mean by that is we have this word we use over and over called ACDSee metadata. And that metadata is information that you add to the files as discussed previously: ratings, color labels, notes, captions, blah, blah, blah. That information is not something that you can obviously add in Windows more broadly or in a different software. So when I say proprietary, it means that when you're interacting with ACDSee, that information belongs to ACDSee, and when you add it, it's added in fields that ACDSee can only see. That is different from when we look at, if we look at our properties window here, and I click on metadata, you can see that there's these two other fields, IPTC metadata and EXIF metadata. These fields are universal fields when it comes to files and will contain information that ACDSee doesn't necessarily add in this case. If I'm looking at IPTC metadata, IPTC metadata is broadly copyright information. And if you're interacting with a file that you say got from a photographer for your wedding, or you got images from a photographer who is a commercial photographer, they will typically fill out this information themselves. They're going to fill out the IPTC metadata because they want that image that they send to different individuals and stakeholders. They want them to be able to see that the image belongs to them and that metadata is theirs. The other thing is EXIF metadata refers to metadata that is taken with the camera. So this refers to things that you'll all be familiar with, like ISO, f-stop, your f number in regards to things, when it was, the date it was taken, all of these things, whether there was a flash or not when you took the photo, and then the GPS coordinates. The photo was taken at the moment it was taken. So this EXIF metadata, if you have a source image that was taken on a phone or it was taken on a camera that you have, all this information will be pre-populated when you go to import these images into ACDSee, meaning that this will already be all listed for you. So just so you're aware, these IPTC and EXIF metadata columns, you can interact with them within ACDSee, but these are not things that are stored in the database per se. It's just those ACDSee metadata items that are stored in the database. Okay. So Bill asked, if all the new databases contain same data, does the conversion keep the newest version of that data? Okay. So if you have older than 2025 and if whichever one you're drawing on that has the information that you need, but you're saying that, I think I know what you're saying. So you're saying that you've made some adjustments in 2026 and then you want to convert the database from 2025 and expect to keep that new content that you've created. I don't believe it works like that. I think when you go through the conversion wizard process, the conversion wizard is going to take the contents of your old database and then copy and paste them, basically removing any fields from 2026. So the conversion process then replaces the contents of 2026. I could be wrong about that, but I'm fairly certain, I would say about 80% sure that that is how it works. Trevor asked, will existing information in the database be overwritten? If I initially pull from 2025, then 2024, will the 2024 data overwrite the 2025 data that's pulled in? Yeah, so we just covered that. My understanding is that it will. If an iPhone photo has info, like a label, etc., that is then loaded into ACDSee, can this iPhone metadata be accessed within ACDSee? So this is a tougher question to answer, but if it has a label, it is likely already within the IPTC metadata in some respect, unless the metadata that you're describing is itself proprietary. Excuse me. And what I mean by that is if this is something that's only visible on an iPhone, then it's not going to come up in the IPTC metadata. However, if it's like a general field metadata item, then it'll probably appear in IPTC. I would be doubtful that this would appear in EXIF metadata unless it was already, if it's something to do with the shutter speed, whatever. Now, if you're talking about, I have an iPhone photo, and in iPhone, I have the ability to rate my image. And when I say rate my image, I mean give it a rating between 1 and 5 or a color label, like many softwares do. That will likely be interpreted within an ACDSee metadata system. So I know, and a good example of this is we have had users that have added a star rating using Lightroom. And those Lightroom labels, to my understanding, are interpreted as number ratings. So we would take that star rating and then interpret it in that way. So there's a chance, like I'm not saying this is true. Again, it's hyper dependent on which metadata we're talking about here, but it might be interpreted in that way. Okay. Bruno says, when I use the wizard, there is a step that you haven't discussed. It is prompting me to map database drive info to create new database entry. Um, Prompting me to map database drive and to create new database entry. Bruno, can you send a message to me over Connect? I'm not certain what this is, and I don't totally want to re-rail the workshop in order to sort of try to see if I can find this. So message me, and if I don't have an answer for you, I'm going to direct you to the developers, and they can help you more there. This is something that we can deal with for sure, though. If this notice is coming up, it means it's like a common use case situation. So, okay. So the one thing I do want to talk about is something called cataloging files now, because it also interacts with the database in a pretty direct way. Here, I'm just gonna have some water here. So if I navigate to let's navigate to a folder. Let's go back to my pictures folder here. And let's navigate to, I guess it really doesn't matter here. I'll go into my people photographs. Yeah, these all have pending metadata. So this icon here, this little bucket, or more probably particular, is a little film cartridge. But for those who know what a film cartridge is, this icon is indicative of the fact that information has been added to this file, but it has not been embedded to the file. And when I say information, I mean ACDSee metadata. So if I navigate to, looks like this image doesn't actually have anything. It's been wiped of metadata, but it still has this icon indicated here. So let's add metadata really quickly. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to add the metadata person to these three images, just so we can see that this keyword has been added. It also looks like it has the keyword of clothing already added to it previously. So if I look at these three images and I look at my properties under keywords, you can see that these three images have two rather keywords associated with them. And this associated keyword, when I add a keyword, it prompts me with this little icon right here to embed that metadata. Now, you might wonder what this is. So, we've been talking about the database so far. Embedding your metadata is a process by which you actually add metadata information to the file itself, which is different from the database. When I go in and I add the word fall, for example, the autumn, to these images, when I click on fall, that is immediately added to the database. However, when I click on fall, I'm also prompted with this little embed pending icon, this little blue bucket here next to these images, to save that information directly to the file itself. Why would I want to do that? The reason why I would want to do that is because if I lose my database, if my database becomes corrupt for some reason, my hard drive crashes, and I lose access to that database, pardon me, but I still have access to these images, these files. Perhaps they're on a hard drive that's separate or something like that, whatever. If I have these images, but I have lost access to my database, well, then if I didn't have the ability to embed this information directly within the file themselves, then those categories, those keywords, all of this hard work that I've been doing, that developing, is lost, right? Permanently lost. So what ACDSee has done is created a secondary method to reconstruct your database not using the database itself, but using the files themselves. So when I go to add information to my images, um, that little embed metadata icon is going to pop up. If I leave the software, if I close the software, typically speaking, the software will prompt me to embed that information to those files. And doing so is something that ACDSee really recommends. We recommend that you embed all of the information that you've added to your files in the event that you need to reconstruct your database using the files themselves. If I right click on these files, you'll also see that under metadata, there is the ability to embed ACDSee metadata, or I can also clear this embed pending icon. But if I embed ACDSee metadata, you'll see that that icon will disappear when I click embed. So I'm going to embed it. And the icon, that blue icon, that embed pending metadata icon, has now disappeared. And the reason why is because when I go to right click and go to metadata and go to embed ACDSee metadata, this will be saved to the file. And like I said, if you don't want to go through this process and click on embed metadata, when I go to close my software, when I go to close the application itself, ACDSee will prompt you to do this. So when I do that, these files themselves, these 6 images that I have then henceforth embedded the metadata within, I now have gained the ability to basically do the process of cataloging files. So cataloging our files will allow us to draw from that embedded metadata. And when I draw from that embedded metadata, I will be able to reconstruct it in my new database. Again, the use case scenario here is, oh no, my database has been destroyed. And I have a new version of ACDSee. And I have access to all these old files because they were on a hard drive. And I was good and I embedded my metadata. So now I can take these files and I go to Tools, Database, and Catalog Files. And when I catalog these files, what I can do is I can add this metadata. So, catalog files. ACDSee automatically adds thumbnails and file information to the database as you browse. We know that. You can use the catalog files tool to add groups of files to the database without having to first browse the folders. In addition, certain ACDSee metadata, including keywords, categories, and tags, will only be added to the database by cataloging with this tool. So what we're suggesting is that, wow, if I've done this, I've gone through the process of adding this information to our files, I can choose a folder or I can select a group of files and I can import, notably, ACDSee metadata, including categories, keywords, tagged, and collection. And if I wanted to, I can go through the process of adding face data, including face outlines and names that are either from ACDSee itself or from Lightroom or Picasa. And when I do that, when I catalog these images, when I go to start that process, that information will be added to a new database that doesn't contain it. Okay? What it's also suggesting here is in the event that I want to catalog, this is also useful if I want to catalog from a folder that I have not yet browsed to. So if I wanted to go to a new series of images that I've taken on an external hard drive, so I plugged in my camera, I can catalog directly from this so I don't have to go through the process of adding those thumbnails to it. So this process will save us from doing that. The other thing that's worthy of noting too is when I go to the ACDSee homepage in 2026, database is right here and catalog files is right here. So I can open up the catalog files function directly from the homepage. I don't have to navigate to the tools and database and catalog files to do that. Embed pending is also here. So if I click on embed pending will highlight to me every single file in my hard drive that I have not embedded the metadata within the file itself. So if I click on any of these images, or if I rather just can click Control A, I can go through the process of forcing an embed right here, rather than closing my software and embedding all of those images that I have not embedded right from that. So this gives me a flag right there that deals with unembedded images. Okay, let's answer some questions. Bruno said, can the embedded info be accessible read by another ACDSee user? Yeah. So this is a great question. So ACDSee metadata is something that is accessible to another ACDSee user. So Bruno has added metadata to his images. These 6 images, he's added this metadata by embedding it, and he has sent me these files in particular. He's sending me these 6 files, and he's saying, I have the greatest categories of all time that you're going to want, Adam. Have these images. And I would simply take these images, right click on them, go through that cataloging process, or going to the home screen or using the tools section to catalog those files. And I would then take those metadata qualities and add them to my database. So I can take this information that Bruno's added, these categories, these keywords, these incredible categories and keywords that Bruno has that he wants me to have, and I could see those, but only through the cataloging process. Those files will be treated as new to me otherwise. In effect, they will not have any metadata associated with them. Really good question. Okay, so Irina says, so if I copy this embedded photos to a USB disk, this data stays in the photos files. Yeah. So if you've embedded that information within those files, and then you take those files and you move them to a hard drive or whatever, that's still on those files. So this information is saved to with writable files, so JPEGs, PNGs, TIFF files. That information is saved directly to the writable file. Irina, with raw images cannot be written to. So if you're moving those files to a secondary hard drive or whatever, you need to move them in ACDSee. And the reason why this is an extremely niche case scenario, you need to move them in ACDSee because ACDSee, when you're editing raw files, needs to create a sidecar file. These files are invisible to you, the user, because they contain that metadata, those categories, those keywords, etc. That information is saved to the sidecar file, not the file itself. Again, raw files are proprietary. So a raw file from a Canon camera, from a Nikon camera, nobody can open that. You can only interpret it. And in order to make changes to a file like that, whether it be visual changes, like I want to adjust the exposure on this image, or whether it be metadata information, I want to say that this person has mic in it, or this image has mic in it. In order to do either of those two things, ACDSee needs to create a secondary file that it can then reference for the larger file. So when moving JPEGs, go nuts, have fun. When moving raw files, make sure that you move those files that you've embedded that information to using the software itself. And in fact, if you're working with ACDSee, you should use ACDSee to move these files regardless. You should not be using Windows File Explorer to move these files, especially if we're adding metadata that you deem relevant and important. Irina, does that make sense? That's a really niche question. It's a really, really detailed question, but that is the answer to your question. Anyway, let me know if that helps. Leonard asked, okay, so this is a user interface question. So Leonard says, my right panel doesn't show up in 2026. So presumably, like me, Leonard, you're in manage mode. Okay, awesome. So remember that detail. Move your files using ACDSee. There's a variety of different ways you can move your files, but here I'll show you exactly what I mean too. It's easier to see it. How do I show you this? I think I have a folder with some raw images in it. 2025? No, 2024. I will come back to Leonard's question in a moment here. Just trying to see if I have some raw images that I can preview this with you. Ah, here we go. This is a raw image, right? No, PNGs, JPEGs. Oh gosh, where do I put my raw images? That's always the trouble, isn't it? Oh, maybe it's an HDR. It's probably an HDR. Okay, here we go. All right. Let's see how I show you this. So, here's a raw image. Irina, it has a development to it. So I've developed this image. Um, so like I said, when you're interacting with raw files, a file called a sidecar file is created. This file is by default invisible, and the reason why it's invisible is because we don't want people to move images without it. If I go to view, if I go to filter, if I go to advanced filters, I can show XMP files and show hidden files and folders. Click on that, and this raw image here, so it's called Camera Raw Wharf Street, has this XMP image that was previously invisible to me. This XMP file is what ACDSee references when you make changes to the file. So if you're moving this file without ACDSee, then this image or this XMP file will not be moved. But when you move this file using ACDSee, and you don't have what I just turned on to show you that that exists, when I move this file, I'm also moving that XMP file. So meaning that that information is visible to me. Again, this is really niche. I don't really want to show you how to open up those XMP files just because I really don't want people to like turn that on and then forget to move their XMP files. But moving a file without its XMP file means that you can't really see the changes that you've made to your image. So move your raw files in ACDSee, right? Not in Windows where that XMP file isn't moved alongside. You're definitely not that long, Stefan. I would say that's too long. Also, um, and that's the checklist that you're describing. Although that being said, I don't know how many like categories and keywords and how large your database was. I mean, if you had tens of thousands of images, it might just take that long, but that seems like pretty long. I think if you're having any issues with the database wizard, I would probably contact support or use the connect page to interact with and ask the developers questions. I'm sorry that I can't in particular be like, here's your issue, but I'm not a support technician. And there might be something that we've omitted or forgotten in the conversion process that maybe just a quick fix would do that. So I'm sorry that I don't have the answer to that question, but I would definitely say that that seems too long unless you have an enormous database. Yeah. Okay. So Leonard asked a question to do with the user interface. I actually just did a tutorial on this like yesterday. But if I hide a panel, that panel will disappear from view. These three icons at the top here, Leonard, hide panels. Then this properties advanced search activity manager, this is considered a panel. So when I remove it from view using these icons or this one or the bottom ones, when I remove them all, that hides them from view. But when I do that, what I'm really doing is I'm interacting with the panes section here. And so what you're discussing, Leonard, is you're saying my right panel doesn't show up. So there's two things that are occurring here. You've hidden it from view. You've closed each individual panel. And when I close something like the activity manager, advanced search, and properties, if I close all three of those, that'll disappear. And as such, those panes will disappear. The check mark will disappear from this section right here. So if I click on properties, it'll re-add it. If I click on, what else do we have here? Oh gosh, now I need to remember. We had properties, we had advanced search, and we had, activity manager. So I've gone in and I've re-added those three things here. The other thing as well is at any point in manage mode specifically, you can always click on workspaces and navigate to default workspace. And by clicking on default workspace, it'll reset the whole thing back to its original settings. So if your right panel is not appearing in edit mode or manage mode, it is because you've either hidden your elements from view or because they have been closed and therefore are unchecked within the panes window. Leonard, does that answer your question? Pardon me. I'm just getting over a cold. It's been like 3 days of feeling quite miserable, but I'm actually on the other end of it now. So Marina asked, yeah, great. I'm glad you got it. Actually, Leonard, let me know if you can get those panes back too. If you're able to actually return them to your window, I think like that would be helpful. Arena asked, if I use the AI software for evaluation of photos, if I use an AI software for the evaluation of photos, how can I burn AI results into ACDC? I don't know. That Sorry, you're interacting with something that isn't ACDC and trying to get it into ACDC. I do not know. If you're using an AI software that evaluates photos that is very common and you want to see it in some way integrated into ACDC, I would definitely recommend this as a feature for the developers. But my understanding is this feature does not exist in ACDC. CB asked, what's the best way to move the entire database to another drive or NAS device as an example? Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, if we move it, the moving of the database itself is much less complicated than cataloging files. You can move the database itself. Um, you can navigate to database and go to open, and I can, oops, what happens here? Database, go to new. I could take this directory and then just open it up in Windows and remap it so I can move it to a different folder. Or if I'm in the process of creating a new database, I can actually browse to a whole new location and set the database there. We don't really recommend doing this because then you need to understand where your database is. Because then once you've moved your database, if you've moved it using Windows, you need to make sure that you're opening from that location. So it's not, if like you've moved it, it's not going to remember where you've moved it unless you've moved it in the software. So you'll then need to go into, you have to go into file and you'll have to go to database and you'll have to open from its new location. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Leonard. Great. So, CB, I wouldn't worry too much about moving the database. Just remember where it is and then remap it by clicking the open tool when you go to, because otherwise ACDC is going to forget where that database is, right? So, yeah, to another drive. As for, um, as for the hard drive being, sorry, the database being on a separate hard drive, I believe it always needs to be connected. Otherwise, all of your images will be like demapped or whatever. So if you have an external hard drive that you're placing that database on, I believe that it has to be always connected. That would be a question for the developers as well. I have several hard drives on my personal computer, in which case moving the database to another location to a different hard drive is totally fine. But if you're using like an external drive, like a flash drive or something like that, then that might be something that there might be some difficulties of that. But you can move the database, and then you can just direct the ACDC to open it based on that location. Okay, Tom states when I did my database conversion from 2025 to 2026, my database contained information on 300,000 photos and the conversion took over 2 to 3 hours. Okay, so that's really helpful to Stefan rather. Um, just because I don't know how big your database is, but it sounds like it can take a while depending on how large your database is. Um, I'm not gonna um, I'm not gonna name our developers. I don't that's like sensitive information. I'm not gonna like dox my developers, but the developers are on the Connect page. You can chat to the ACDC developers, the development team, directly from the what is it, feature requests and developer Q&A. And so if you ask a question in this section here, the developers will get back to you. And it might take some time, but they do comment on this thread. So again, I'm not going to name the developers per se. I don't think that's fair to them, but this is where they interact. So if you want to interact with them, they will interact with you on this section here. Okay. CB asked, I use this device for access with other devices. Okay, nice. So the database holds all of the various drives, but sits on your main PC. So the database holds all of your. No. The ACDC database only deals with that metadata that I listed previously. I'm just suggesting that in the case that I was talking about CB's question, the database can be the location of the database on your hard drive, your PC hard drive, can be moved as long as you make sure to open the database in its new location. So there are no important files in the documents or programs folder, only the database folder is important. Um, that's not necessarily true because if we look at where the database is, right? The database is it's under users admin. In this case, it'll determine a location for your database to be set. But I wouldn't say that it's not necessarily within documents or programs because this location might vary depending on the way that you've mapped your hard drive or the way that your computer is set up in general. So I would not say that documents or program folders are unimportant. I would verify whether if they are and whether by default your database has been mapped to them. Again, I don't know what the hard drive setup looks like. This is a common C drive, in this case is a pretty common mapping structure, but who knows what your personal computer looks like, in which case I can't say for certain whether or not they are important or aren't important for the purpose of where your database ends up. Okay, that kind of covers everything I wanted to talk about today. Just to reiterate, we talked about what the database is, we talked about moving, opening databases, creating new databases. We talked pretty extensively about what is in the database and what's considered valid for the database. And then we also talked about the converting process, so converting your old database to your new software. And then further, we talked about actually embedding metadata and why you'd want to embed metadata, and then what it looks like to catalog files based on the metadata that you've embedded within them. So that covers everything that I kind of wanted to talk about today. This is sort of an introductory workshop on ACDSee's database. It's a really big topic. It's one where lots of people don't know about any of this. You kind of operate implicitly without knowing these qualities. And then obviously, this is really important when it comes to moving to a different product, or maybe you're starting ACDSee 2026 and you like your database and you want to use those qualities, or it's important for other reasons in the sense that you want to make sure that your ACDSee is going to be locked tight if you lose your database or something like that, and you want to go through that cataloging process. The other thing too, pardon me, is understanding how ACDSee works, how you can utilize it, is also gives you a better understanding of like what you can and can't do in the software. In essence, like what there are limitations to moving files and things like that. But having a better understanding of what the database actually does gives you a bit more power and freedom to do what you want within the software. CB asked, would you consider a workshop that would deal with database maintenance and optimization? Yeah, absolutely. And I would consider it as well for a tutorial. If it's, I don't know if I haven't actually covered it as a topic, which means I should probably look into it. It might not be a huge topic, in which case, CB, I will make a tutorial for you, but I will be writing that down and I'll consider it for a future workshop. How's that sound? Oh, sweet. I'm actually getting some good suggestions. Let me write them down. I'm just going to open up a little notepad. Actually, I'll just write them down. Here, hold on. Sorry, I'm literally doing this the old fashioned way. Um, so, some good suggestions on workshops. I'm always here for that. So, workshop number one would be a workshop on conversion, database, and maintenance. And okay. And then another one on let's see, what did Murray state? Please consider webinar outline a simple procedure for backing up images plus database on an external hard drive. Okay, so backing up database and images on external hard drive. Okie doke. Do we have any other suggestions? Yes, for more database, says Marissa. Is there an option to automatically embed metadata? Good question. There might be. Let's see. Tools, options, metadata. Excuse me. I feel like I need to blow my nose. Manage mode. Automatically embed metadata. Let's see. Okay. No. Where is the metadata section? ACDSee, mobile sync, document file types, database. Display backup reminder, import IPTC, set embedding, tagging files, embed. Do not auto embed metadata. Embed metadata on shutdown. Display reminder every blah blah blah. Do not prompt when updating embed metadata IPTC. No, there's no automatic. We can do it three different ways in ACDSee. So we can not prompt you to auto embed metadata. We can embed metadata on shutdown. So again, what I mean by that is when you go to close the software, it'll prompt you to do that. Or we can display a reminder, reminder text that tells you, every day or every month or whatever, when to embed it. But it looks like the actual embedding process is a manual process. It can't be automated based on everything I've seen here. Could be wrong about that, but all signs point to probably not for that question, Bill. Great question. Okay, so I got two good suggestions for either tutorials or workshops, which we'll add and touch base. I'll talk to the developers about. For those of you that are having database issues, I would definitely recommend talking to the developers or just going through support directly with ACDSee on the website. I'm sorry they're having issues. Bruno, webinar multi-external hard drives and database management. This is one that people have wanted for a long time, and I would actually have to sit down and definitely talk to the developers about that myself before I could even touch on it, but it is a very good suggestion. So webinar on multiple external hard drives, and database maintenance. Jeff said if you turn off the two prompts at the bottom of the option screen, that's basically automatic. Oh, okay. Let's have a look. Just not until shutdown. Okay, so if I go to options and go back to this, if I turn them off, do not prompt when embedding ACDSee metadata, do not show summary page after embedding metadata. Yeah, I suppose if, yeah, I guess you don't prompt it, and then when you close it, it would do it automatically. Yeah, fair enough. That might work. That's a good point. Thank you, Jeff. Asked, great, how to wisely set metadata because my ACDSee crashed often. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, we definitely talk about adding like keywords and categories pretty extensively in other, but that's not necessarily what you mean. Wisely set metadata. Chuck asked, I want to combine iPhotos with regular camera images, which use different dial naming methods. Okay. I want to create a standard file name organized by date and time to organize these photos together. Is there an easy way to do that? Not that I would be able to tell you right now. I'd have to do some research into this. Chuck, I would ask that you send me a message over Connect. Yeah. My ACDSee crashed often when I didn't have enough memory. Okay. So that was a RAM issue. Okay, thank you, everybody. I gotta close out for today. I'm starting to get pretty sniffly. Thank you so much for participating. I will be scheduling a new workshop soon. Maybe we'll be able to cover one of those topics that we touched on today at the end of this workshop. Thank you, Stefan. I appreciate it. I really appreciate everyone participating, and I will see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Oh, one last thing. If you have any questions, just reach out to me on Connect, even if they're unrelated.